Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Connect Conversations. Today's conversation is all about TPM, and it's brought to you as a part of MOBIUS Connect's ongoing YouTube series, Connect Conversations. I'm Kim Fugger, the manager of MOBIUS Connect, and I will be your moderator for today's session. First, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our hosts of Connect Conversations, global reliability experts Doug Plucknette and Ron Moore. Well, we do have Ron here right now with us. We are waiting on Doug to join. But before I pass the presentation over here to you, Ron, I just want to encourage our audience here today to please submit any questions through the question panel or the chat function on your screen, and we will share those with Doug and Ron. They are here to answer your questions, even though they are having conversations. So again, anytime during the presentation, submit your questions and we'll get them to answer them. No need to feel like you're going to be called out. We will read and air these anonymously. And Doug and Ron are here to provide their expert advice and perspectives from years in the industry. All right, Ron, well, I'm going to go ahead and let you start things over.
Yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, you can tell we have years in the industry. Just look at us, you know. So, unfortunately, Doug's not here just yet. Apparently, he's been delayed, and I really like to have him with me. He's got a little bit more, hands-on experience with some of this stuff. In any event, today we're going to talk about total predictive maintenance, and it really should be called total productive maintenance. And it really should be called total productive manufacturing. And that's a really important distinction. In fact, Seiichi Nakajima, who wrote the book on TPM, after the book came out, he said he should have called it total productive manufacturing, because it wasn't just about maintenance. It was about maintaining plant function. That's a really important distinction. It's not just about maintenance and being productive with maintenance. It's really about maintaining the plant's function, which means, of course, that you have to have good production, good maintenance, good engineering practices, and so on. So I think most people don't understand that it's really incorrectly labeled. And I think there was some confusion when the book was translated from Japanese to English about the word maintenance. See, in Nakajima's world, maintenance means maintain plant function. In our world, it's more about, maintenance, PMs and PDMs and PAMs and so on and so forth. So everybody keep that in mind. It's total productive manufacturing. So that's one really important point. Another point, sort of a preamble to some of the other stuff I want to get to, is this, and that is that you really ought to do Kaizen before you get too heavy into TPM. And another Japanese expert on all this stuff, he said so as well. In fact, he said you've got to do 5S before you do TPM. Now, if you recall from last week, what's Kaizen about? Well, it's 5S, all 5 S's, so you sustain. It's about 5 Y's, making it easy, straightforward for people to do a little bit of analysis on root cause. It's about standard work, having standards for all the work you do, and constantly looking for ways to upgrade those standards and then standardizing once you do that. It's about go and see, Genchi Genbutsu, I think is the Japanese word. Go talk to the troops, find out what's going on out there. Look for yourself, engage the workforce in addressing problems and issues, get them involved in the solutions. It's about having a visual workplace. And of course, it's about structured, periodic improvement time to address a particular issue. So TPM, total productive manufacturing, do Kaizen before you get too heavy into TPM. And then I guess the last point is it's more of a negative point, and that's this. TPM, a lot of people associate TPM with operator maintenance or operator PM or operator care or operator directed, whatever. And certainly that's a piece of it. And it's an essential piece, but it's only a small element in TPM. So what are the major tenets of TPM? Well, one of them is that, the TPM is about maintaining the plant's function. Like I said earlier, it's not about just maintenance. Another one is this: it's the current state of our equipment is always its worst state relative to its future. So what does that mean? That means we're going to be constantly looking for ways to improve the current state of our processes and our equipment. So the current state is its worst state. And, just kind of a side comment, those of you involved in some new projects, which were, well, shall we say, difficult to get started up and difficult to operate, well, the current state is its worst state because you've been through that. Another basic tenet is that you're going to measure all your losses from ideal, this OEE, overall equipment effectiveness. And so you're going to measure your loss. You're going to set what ideal is, and you're going to measure all your losses from that ideal state. Now, a really important point, and I think a lot of people miss this, is not to focus on what the number is, not to focus on whether or not it's 50% or 90%. Focus on managing the losses. Identify the losses and then manage those losses. And if you do that, and if you get your workforce involved in helping you manage the losses, then the OEE, if you do that effectively, then the OEE will be whatever it's supposed to be. See, if you've got just a couple of examples, if you've got 200 different products that you're making, and maybe they have a shelf life, and maybe there's small orders, all kinds of complexity gets involved in here, then you're not likely to ever achieve an 85% OEE because you've got all those changeovers in there. You've got all those things that you have to do to maintain that plant. You've got all those startup and shutdown issues and so on. On the other hand, if you got one product that you run continuously, then you probably ought to be up somewhere around 90, maybe even 95%. So the point again is that if you measure and manage the losses, then you'll have much better performance. And by the way, you'll have better safety, as we've discussed in some of these previous podcasts. Another one is continuous training and learning. That is, you're always in an evolutionary state relative to your processes, developing your people, upgrading and improving things. So that always requires lots of employee training and lots of employee development. And if the first thing you cut relative to your processes is training and development for your people, well, things aren't going to work out very well for you. They'll train by tribal knowledge, or they'll train by accident, and so on. So that's a really important tenet of TPM. Another one is when you do repairs and restoration activities, your primary objective ought to be restore that process, that equipment, to a like new condition or better. So in the TPM model, patching is really prohibited. Now, you may have to on occasion for a given circumstance that's an emergency, but fundamental tenet of TPM is to restore equipment performance to a like new condition or better. So that's quite a bit different from the way most folks out there think. So another one is the disciplined use of PM, PDM, and planning and scheduling. The next principle of TPM is maintenance prevention in the design. Now, another way you might think about that phrase is design for reliability or reliability-based design. So, those are the basic tenets of TPM. And again, it should be total productive manufacturing. Now, I've said that about 5 or 6 times now, so I hope it's sticking, with you guys. So those are the basic tenets. The question is, are you effectively applying those tenets? Well, maybe you are, maybe you're not. I don't know. And I wish Doug were here to, offer his views. We could bounce it back and forth a bit. But since it's just me today, I reckon you're stuck with me. Doug did send some comments, and I thought he would be here to comment on his comments. So I'm going to give them to you and then make my comments. Why do TPM efforts fail? Well, he says leaders are using the tools to transfer tasks from maintenance to operations. Well, some of that's appropriate, and maybe some of it's not. So the real question is, what makes sense? Of all the things that operations folks have to do, what would make sense, all things considered? What is it, first of all, they have the time to do? Secondly, what is it they have the skills to do? Another one might be, well, what are the failure modes that relate to those skills? Are people adequately trained in doing those tasks? Do those tasks present any particular kind of risk or danger to the operator? And that it may seem like, well, it seems like easy enough, but maybe there's some things that are in there that maybe they shouldn't do because there's some inherent risk that they're not aware of. So before you start transferring tasks from maintenance to operations, you need to put your maintenance guys together, your operations folks together, 2 or 3, 4 guys, maybe an engineer in there to decide, well, what makes sense, all things considered. And then occasionally you run into union issues where maybe the contract is a little fuzzy about whether or not this is acceptable. If that's the case, what I recommend to folks is, look, now some people are going to react to this statement, but just hold your wrath for just a second. Just put the union contract aside for a minute, okay, and then discuss amongst yourselves, well, what makes sense for either party to do that would be the best thing for the business. Then after you've gone through that and you've settled on some things, go back to the contract and see if it's permitted. If it is, then get on with it. If it's not, then you're going to have to negotiate what that might be and what it might include consistent with the contract. So the point of this, of course, is you want people doing things that are, that help you get better. And the union folks out there, I would say to you that, look, jobs are a consequence of being competitive. If you aren't competitive, there aren't any jobs. And if you are, there's more opportunity to grow the union. So it's a real fine balance to try to achieve. So just keep that in mind. Jobs are a consequence of being competitive. So let's see, another comment Doug made, the transfer of tasks, regardless of how simple, without explanation of why the task is important to be performed. Yeah, And this is not just TPM related, but a lot of times folks are doing things and don't really know why they're doing it. They've had an instruction set, a procedure, whatever it is. They've been trained in that, but they haven't been taught as to why each of those steps is important. What happens if you don't do it? What happens when you do it? And, what's the consequence of all that? So, and again, it's not just TPM, it's for everything we do. People have to understand what's behind that. Why is that important? Why should I bother? Because sometimes they may think something, well, it's not important. Doesn't seem important to me, so I don't bother with it. And it turns out it's really critical, in fact, dangerous if you don't. So I think that's a really important point. Another thought there is, what failure mode are you addressing? And who is best equipped, trained, capable of addressing that failure mode? So let's see. Yeah, he says here, why TPM efforts fail. Training stops at the supervisory level. Well, that goes back again to the issue around training and developing your folks and educating them on why things are important, why they're not, what to do, and so on. And another one, he says, the effort is attempted without shop floor input. Yeah, amen. Amen to that. I mean, if you look at the data from folks who study this, not me, I'm just echoing what guys like Bob Kelleher say. He says about 30% of your workforce is engaged. They're actively trying to do a good job. They're looking for ways to get better and so on. About 50% are disengaged. They'll do the minimum. They're kind of, maybe you might think of it as sightseeing. They're doing the minimum. They're doing a decent job, but they're not looking for ways to get better, looking for more work, looking for ways to, help the company. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you'd rather have them engaged and, active participants in trying to make things better. And then about 15-20% are actively disengaged. That is, they are kind of disruptors. Okay. And so it's really important that we figure out why. How do we engage more of the people who are disengaged, and how do we get people who are actively disengaged to be at least sightseeing, at least doing their job and, trying to help the company. And the more people we get into that actively engaged part, the better off we're going to be. So, and the point of all this is that shop floor input on everything is really critical. If you go back to Kaizen, right? What's one of the issues there? Go and see. Go talk to the folks doing the work and find out what the problems are with the work and get them involved in solving the problems. To me, that seems like such an obvious thing. So let's see, I got a question here. Ron, I am confused between Kaizen and TPM. Can you give one main difference between the two? Well, I said this early on, maybe, you didn't get here at the start, but do Kaizen before you do TPM. So Kaizen, I'm going to give you more than one. Kaizen is 5S, 5Y, standard work, go and see, visual workplace, structured improvement time. Those are so-called Kaizen activities. TPM is total productive manufacturing. It's about maintaining the plant's function. It's about measuring and managing, emphasis on managing losses from ideal. Okay. It's about, what have we got here? I have to go back to my list. Continuous training and development of employees. The use of PM, PDM, and planning and scheduling. It's about restoring equipment performance to like new, and it's about maintenance prevention in the design. So there's some pretty significant differences in my mind between the two. But if you do Kaizen first, 5S, 5Y, standard work, structured improvement time, you're going to be much more successful in applying TPM, which is about maintaining plant's function. It's about measuring and managing your losses. And yeah, operator care is in there, but it's a piece of it. It's not the whole ball of wax. So I hope I've answered the question, but I'm happy to chat with you. If you have a follow-up question, I'm happy to address that. So let's go back to Doug's list, since he's been delayed, on why TPM efforts fail. The next one is the effort proceeds without baseline measurements. So yeah, how do we know we've improved? Is our OEE getting better? Are we getting lower costs? Do we have better quality? Do we have better safety? So some real fundamental measures need to be put in place so you know if it's working. And the last one, he says, there isn't a plan for success. And he says, train, plan, act, do, verify. That's part of Deming's plan, do, check, act, mantra. So all those things are elements of why it fails. I'm going to back up a little bit. I think fundamentally why TPM fails is people don't understand what it is, and because they don't apply the Kaizen principles that I first talked about in this session. So, and a couple of more tips from Doug. If you want your TPM effort to be successful, build a relationship with a successful non-competing company. So you have ideas to bounce off of. You can go to their place and see what they've done, what works, what doesn't, and you can use them as a sounding board for your efforts. Follow a proven methodology. We've touched on that. Start small and build on success. Yeah. Sometimes folks will say, well, we're going to do this across the plant. Well, wait a minute. How about starting in one area? Maybe it's packaging. Maybe it's with single lines. Start there. Go through this learning exercise about Kaizen, TPM, and then expand it across the site. Because if you start and try to take too big a bite, you'll choke. And that's not very healthy for most people. So start with a pilot, start small, and then grow it into other areas. Let's see, what else does he say? Set behavior based on goals and a reinforcement plan. OEE is a lagging indicator. Performing the right test, right way, at correct intervals would be an example of behavior-based goals. So yeah, I'll talk about rewards just a minute. Rewards can take any number of forms. Sometimes a reward, if you want to think of it that way, is just going out and talking to the guys and saying, hey, great job there. I really appreciate what you did. Something as simple as that, so they know you're looking, they know you appreciate it, and they have, hopefully they develop a sense of pride around doing the right things. And then of course it goes up from there all the way up to some sort of bonus or reward or pay increase or profit sharing or whatever. But I think some of the best rewards relate to developing that relationship with a shop floor so that, they know you really appreciate what they do and they feel comfortable telling you about things that need to be improved. So let's see, he's got a couple more. Focus on identifying losses and defects. And I would add managing the losses, managing the defects. We talked about that earlier. And the role of management is to prevent and remove obstacles. You know, back in my earlier day, when back a long time ago now, when I was president of CSI, one of my jobs I felt like was to remove the obstacles from my people's success. You know, see, the leverage is not necessarily in me. The leverage is getting hundreds of people out there engaged and doing a good job and solving problems and getting better and advising you where the issues and the holdups and the difficulties are so that you can work with them to address that. So I have run through my list of things that I wanted to cover today. And if we're short of time, but glad to take other questions. And if we're not, sadly, Doug's not here, so we can bounce ideas off of one another and stimulate the conversation a little more. So I will pause right there and see if we have any additional questions or comments. Kim, if you have any or want to make something, let's see. Oh, here we got a comment. TPM fails, I believe, due to the lack of communication and education, and union offers should know more about it. Yeah, it says, I guess that's a statement. And yeah, absolutely. That's correct. You know, we had a question earlier, difference between Kaizen and TPM, and I tried to explain that. And if we don't get the workforce involved in some of this, then we're going to have a lot less success. And if we don't engage the union in participating in some of this activities, we're going to have a lot less success. And here's Doug.
There.
Hey, Doug. Listen, I just
me?
covered all the points. We don't need you anymore. No, you know, you and I put together a little outline for this session. I just went through, you know, my list of stuff and your list of stuff, but you weren't here to, you know, give it a little flavor. So I'm going to turn it back to you and see, you know, what are the key issues around implementing a TPM program that you see?
Yeah, the biggest thing with TPM is making sure that it's just not one of those programs that you're trying to use to transfer maintenance tasks to operations. That never goes over well. And it doesn't matter whether it's a union environment or non-union environment. It's just one of those things that I would hope that today in any plant that's out there, people have a plate full of stuff to do, right? Whether you're an operator or whether you're a maintenance person. And really what it's all about is saying, let's take a look at things and say, what makes the best sense for the right person to do? Who's the right person to do it? Yeah. Whether it's maintenance or operations. And then you and I have talked quite a bit about, if you're going to do those things, put detailed plans together, right? Something that is procedure based, and we can go ahead and train people on and certify them on and verify that they have the wherewithal to do the task properly. The other issue that I see with it is they don't involve the right people, right? It's one of those things that you have to have the maintenance and operations people in the room when you're having a TPM event to talk about what are we going to do, right? What are the failure modes that go with this equipment? Who's the best person to address the task to mitigate that, whether it's operations or maintenance?
Yeah, we touched on that earlier, and I made a similar point. Put the maintenance guys and the production guys in a room together that relate to the particular issue, maybe an engineer, and have them go through what makes sense. Do the operators have time to do it? Do they have the skills? Do they have the training? Does it make sense? Is it appropriate for them to do it versus maintenance? You know, work through the issues and come to a, you know, reasonable conclusion that makes you more competitive was my point. But, you know, sorry, back to you.
Yeah. And then In fact, I think the most successful one I've ever been involved with was with Whirlpool, and that was early on when I got into consulting. And what they ended up doing is they would do an RCM event, and out of the RCM event, they'd have a TPM event, because during the RCM, we talked about what are the failure modes and what are the different tasks to mitigate and who's the best person to do that. And then we got into, okay, the importance, especially if you're doing any type of task, is to get people to understand why they're doing it, right?
Yep. We
Here's
touched on that too.
here's the reason
Why am I
why the
doing this?
task why does the task need to be done, and then what are the potential consequences if it doesn't get done, right? So really, the task should be aimed at mitigating the failure mode. And when people start to understand failure modes, they'll be able to better do things like root cause analysis and troubleshoot. They'll get better at that for you. They'll also start coming to their leaders and saying, "Hey, what about this? This is something I'm seeing now that I haven't seen in the past. Haven't quite figured it out. What's going on here?" Those types of things. So it's important that this is really something that is done at the right level, that we have the right people in the room. And I know I talked about that, but it even involves safety and quality people, right? What are the different tasks that impact those, and how do we mitigate them, and who's best to handle or manage those?
Yeah.
It's also something that this has got to be a process that starts and continues and sustains. It's not something that you do once and you hope that it sticks. It's something that you train people for. And this is the other issue that I've seen with operations where it does fall apart, and it can be maintenance too as well, is when people get changed around, right? They'll move them from one piece of equipment to another. Well, they don't know the TPM task for that one, right? So now you've got two shifts that are doing it and one that's not, right? And so it's really something you have to put that into your thought process to say, if we're going to do this, it's going to be something that's sustained, and we've got to have plans. And I remember taking this from you in your book to say, right, where most companies fall down is they don't plan on how to sustain, right? That when change happens, how are we going to take care of this? When bodies change, when a manager changes, how do we make sure that that manager doesn't take the focus off of TPM and put it on something else, right?
Yeah.
Let's make sure that we stick to and do the things that we've made improvements of and we got good at, right?
Yeah.
So change to TPM, that's off the table. Change to operators that don't have the experience and the training to do that. That person is not going to come in and not be qualified to run that machine until they are first certified and qualified to do those tasks. Same thing with maintenance, right?
Yeah. One comment I'd make on all that is that, all these improvement tools they're just that, they're tools. And so they're, in my mind at least, they're not an end of themselves. It's not a project. It's process that you're going to use, well, forever, really, because these tools have kind of adapted as appropriate. They have kind of a universal application, and it's not something you do once and you're done. And in fact, if you take that view, then these improvements, it's, I don't know, it's reliability is not something you do once and you're done. It's a forever thing. And TPM and Kaizen are part of the tool bucket for getting better reliability. And I don't know, maybe we got engineers listening, but it's kind of like entropy. You can work really hard to get a system up to a very high level. And then what? Well, if you stop doing what you've been doing and you don't look for other things to make it even better, then what's going to happen? Well, entropy takes over. And for those of you who may not know, entropy is the tendency for a system to dissociate or decay. So if we don't sustain these efforts and these systems, and if we don't look for even better ways to make them better, they will always deteriorate. And so that's a really difficult thing for most companies to do. and I mean, it's a difficult thing for me to do in my day-to-day activities, is to sustain and recognize, it's not a one and done sort of thing. Most of the stuff isn't. Anyways, Doug, back to you. Just wanted to throw that in there. Entropy always wins if you don't watch out for it.
So, and that is, again, I'm trying to remember, I think I asked you this question directly one time when you and I were talking about leadership. That was always my biggest nightmare, was if you get a good effort going and then they change managers, right?
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me, well, it doesn't have to be that way. The companies need to learn to plan to sustain. And that's one of the things, we always talk about planning. How do you plan to sustain? Right. And that is to say, there are certain things that are on the table that the new manager can look at and do. And there are certain things that are off the table because we've already gotten good at that. We've taken care of that problem. Right. And if we continue along the way, so once you get the TPM up and running, okay, stay away from that. Let's focus on something next that we can improve. Right. There's the tools in the toolbox. What's another tool we can start using?
Well, but that principle goes back to the issue of having standard work. As you make these improvements and you get better, then you standardize it. This is how we're going to do things. And if you see an opportunity in a given standard or approach to make it better, you make it better. And then you reset the standard, but you have a standard approach that you try to apply. One thing that, this is a little bit off topic, but kind of, well, not kind of, it's really important, is, let me give you some data. A given, if you take just a broad array of companies, they change either maintenance or production or site or engineering managers. Well, there's a new guy coming in every year or two. And that new guy may not know what you've been through, what you've done, and so on. So unless you have some sort of succession plan to, inform, advise, for lack of a better word, indoctrinate the new guy in what you've done and how you do things, then you may be kind of disappointed in the result that you get. And if you don't do that and you churn these managers every couple of years, then after a while, the folks on the floor become weebies. We be here when you be gone. So we'll not be doing much of what you want. They'll wait you out. So, that's so a succession plan of some sort, so that the new guy coming in is trained in what you're currently doing. Now you seek their ideas on things that you could get better, but you don't want them coming in like a bull in a china shop and destroying everything you've done, unless of course they need to, in which case you're a burning platform anyway, so anything they do might help. But hopefully that's not the guys that are listening.
Right. So the other advice I give people starting out with this is there's a lot of books out there. I mean, Nakajima's is probably the most famous that deals with TPM, but there's a lot of good books out there on TPM. And there's a lot of times a thought that, well, I can read the book and I can do it. And that's a risk. And that's what I tell people is, yeah, you can learn a lot from reading a book, right? But my recommendation is find somebody that's in a non-competing business, go out there and start talking with them, go visit them, go see, because a talk on the phone or a talk like you and I are having over this fancy tool that we have nowadays that didn't exist 20 years ago, right, where we could see each other. That's one thing. It's another thing to go to a place and see the people actually doing it, right?
Yeah.
And that's an immeasurable thing that I tell folks, man, when you go and you see it in action and you actually talk to the people that are doing it, talk to the operators, talk to the maintenance people, and ask them, how'd you get started with this, and how'd you get involved with it? What'd you think when it started out? What were some of the pitfalls that you had to overcome? Those things are invaluable, right?
Yeah.
And you won't get that from a book, right?
No.
You won't get that from going to a conference, right? You might get it a bit at a conference, but those actual site visits are important. Go out and look for somebody. That's the great thing about LinkedIn, is you can start talking with people and have a conversation, via chat, and then when you find somebody that says, hey, I got a good effort going, and this is how we got started. This is who we used. Here's who helped us out. Then set up a visit. It's one of those things that makes a huge difference in the success of a program.
Yeah. Well, I give you a little bit of data, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but there's a broader point. We, as people, we remember 5 or 10% of what we read.
Yep.
We remember 10, 20% of what we read and hear and see, right? We remember, I forget now, is it 60, 70% of what we
Quizzed on, probably.
well, it's shoot, see, it's escaped me for the moment.
All
but
right.
anyways, and the biggest one, the one that really stuck with me the most is we remember 90% of what we teach others.
Right.
So, it was 60, 70%, 80% maybe of what we do, right? So you listen, right? You read, you listen, you watch, have you ever looked at a YouTube video on, for example, how to replace a 4-way valve on a refrigerator?
Yeah.
Well, the guy gets it done in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's easy. 2 hours later, I'm still cursing at the refrigerator.
Yeah.
So
I tend to rewind, stop.
anyways, that's another story.
Exactly.
But,
all right.
We don't remember much of what we read. We remember a little more of what we, maybe read and hear, and a little more of what we read, hear, and see, and a little more of what we do, what we practice, but we remember most of what we teach others. So what the mastery of a given skill is something you can do and do really well. So yeah, back to your point though, and that is, work with others, start small, practice it, and then expand it as you go, bringing others along with you. So there you go. Other comments, Doug? I kind of touched on all the stuff that you sent for this outline we were going to use.
Did we have any questions today? I don't see the question.
Yeah, you have to go down to you have to go down to the bottom, and
there's the chat. There it is.
Yeah. So we're using a little different system this week.
Yeah.
So it makes it hard on folks like us who haven't done or taught others this system.
So along with the TPM comes OEE, and I know we've talked about that. People are probably saying, boy, that Ron and Doug, they like to talk about OEE. One of my favorite examples of OEE was that Whirlpool first company I started doing RCM with when I worked as a consultant, and they, like I said, started doing TPM right along with it. And then we started doing OEE on the critical assets that we were doing RCM and TPM on, and the lead operators themselves were the ones collecting the information for those measures and posting that. And I can remember Kirk Wolfinger saying, one of the times when I came back, boy, you ought to see what shift change looks like now. He said it used to be one of them where it was like the old cartoon where those two sheepdogs go past one another. One's coming in early in the morning, the other one's getting off at night, and morning Ralph, good night Fred, right? He said that's what shift change used to look like. He said now all of a sudden we got these boards up with the TPM information. And he says, and Fred comes in and sees Ralph Ralph had 46% OEE last night, and he wants to know what the heck is going on, because normally it's been 82. And he said, well, this and that happened, and then I called maintenance, and geez, it took a few hours to get this or that changed, and now we're back up and running and things are better. You'll probably have a good shift. So they're actually talking about stuff that happens on the machine now at that shift change, because they've got that information up there that's meaningful to them. Right.
Yeah. Well, and I mentioned earlier that the purpose of OEE is to manage the losses. It's not about any particular set of numbers, because I've been in operations where 50% OEE was sterling because of other constraints and, so on and so forth. It's in a pharmaceutical plant. And, for them to achieve 50% was just wow. And I've been in other plants where 50% just sucks. It's just
awful. Yeah.
It's bankruptcy territory.
Yeah, if you're making widgets, that's a bad day.
Yeah. So again, the point is to manage the losses and get the folks involved doing the work and helping you improve the work. So, all right.
But I thought it was key to have the people from the line putting those numbers together. Now, of course, they had a PLC that was telling them, here's how many that went through and here's how many that may have come off the line that needed a rework or something. Right. But those numbers were meaningful to them because, again, it's something they're working with every day. Right. They know when they had a good shift. They know when they're having a good shift. And
well,
when things aren't going right, they know what caused that number.
Right. And they start to take ownership.
Yeah.
And they start to identify with the numbers, and they start to relate to how the numbers relate to what they're doing. And they start to communicate that to other folks. And, it's what I referred to earlier is being actively engaged in managing the process, as opposed to passively or actively disengaged.
And it's funny, Kirk says that, my first thought was I had my reliability engineer gathering those numbers, and that was taking him, half a day in the morning to come in and talk to different people and get the stuff off the PLCs and talk with the operators about what might have been going on. And he says, and what's he doing besides collecting data? Right. So it was his idea to come to me and say, hey, how about we get the lead operator on each shift to do this? And then they'll know what was going on, right? I won't have to ask those questions. They'll put it up on a board right there by the machine and be able to put bullet points by here's what the quality losses were caused by, here's what our operational losses were caused by.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Well, I mean, you said it earlier that they're involved in helping you solve the problem. So, and that you want to push the leverage is in getting the folks doing the work better, not in you sorting through and trying to analyze. And, you can't be very successful if it's left to one guy any more than any other effort can. So
when the reliability engineer's doing it, how is he talking to the operator? They got night guy's gone. Right. Yeah. So that information, if he's going to get it, he, is going to have to wait till the next week, or he's going to have to come in early someday to find out what the heck is going on. Right. Yeah. So,
all righty. Looks like we got about 5 minutes left, Doug. I just want to repeat, there's a Russian phrase for all y'all that speak Russian. I speak a tiny bit. Повторение матчучения. And what that means is repetition is the mother of learning. Or from my old military days, tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them. Same principle. So I just want to repeat a couple of things I mentioned at the beginning of this, and that is that TPM is total productive manufacturing. It's not so much about maintenance. Maintenance is a part of it. So that's the first point. Second point, you do Kaizen to create the organizational readiness. You create the enablers of people before you get too heavy into a TPM effort. And the last key thing to me is too many people think that TPM is about operators doing maintenance and transferring maintenance to operations. Well, that's a part of it, but it's far more than that. So I'll leave it at that. Doug, do you have any closing commentary.
My only close on this is really a good, powerful tool that is going to, Kaizen, like you said, is the first step. This is a good second step, and this is a step that you will see a marked difference in not only how your equipment performs, but how your people perform, right? You're going to start seeing more communication if you're doing this right. You're going to start seeing more of those defects identified and eliminated if you're doing this right. You're going to get people that are engaged and understand the process of why we're here and what we're doing in our business.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing.
Yep. Let's see. Let's see. Testing to see if chat is working. Yeah, thank you both. Thank you for your service. Hey, you're welcome for my service. It's been eons ago, but here we are today. So did you thank my my classmates at West Point? They deserve more thanks than me. So let's see. Maybe one other comment. I've read Masaaki Mai's Kaizen book. I've read Nakajima's TPM book. An interesting thing to me was after I wrote Making Common Sense Common Practice, I went back and I read those books. I wasn't even aware of them. I was just, busy beavering away. And those books are totally consistent with Making Common Sense Common Practice. They're entirely compatible. I didn't know that at the time. So I just wanted to make that little observation. All right. Are we done?
We are done.
Okay, Doug.
I apologize for my tardiness.
You guys, thank you for your time and an awesome session. On behalf of the entire team here at MOBIUS Connect, we thank you to our wonderful audience for joining us today. Just as a quick reminder, you can see past episodes of Connect Conversations on YouTube, and we will share the link to subscribe to our YouTube channel in an email following this webinar. Be on the look. Visit reliabilityconnect.com for our next Connect Conversations November 16th. At the same time, you will be emailed the registration link if you sign up for the form online. But this next one will be all about Six Sigma. Hopefully I said that one right.
Yeah, Six Sigma.
Then we got it.
Manage variation. By the way, if you do everything we've been talking about so far, you'll manage variation. You may not need so much Six Sigma, but we're going to talk about it.
All right.
All righty.
Thank you both for joining us, and everyone have a great day. Stay safe, and we will see you next time.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.